Welcome back to the Act Two podcast, a podcast for the real-life working screenwriter. I'm Tasha Hugh.
And I am Josh Hallman.
And we're Act Two, and we have a special guest, so skip the intro, fuck it, into more important things like introducing Patrick Tuck, who is the editor of The Lowdown with Ethan Hawke, Chad Powers with Glenn Powell, Reservation Dogs, Dave, a whole bunch of other things. And we know each other personally, so for the first time ever, I looked up your IMDb, and you also did an episode of Chef's Table.
I did.
Which I feel like I would love to do a whole episode about in another time because I'm obsessed with that show. I had no idea, Patrick. But Patrick, introduce yourself. Welcome.
Hi. Yes, Patrick Tuck. Thank you for having me. I'm stoked to be here.
If anyone is wondering why the hell we're having an editor on a screenwriting podcast, it's a lot because part of our job, a big part of our job, is working with editors like Patrick. And Patrick has really unique insights on what it's like to be on the post side and all of the problems that come up because we didn't do our jobs properly. And also just like what are sort of like the successful writers that he's worked with? What are some of the behaviors they may have? How do they work with an editor in a way that proves successful so that we can do all of our job really well? So that's whenever Patrick and I get together, that's basically what we talk about. So we figured let's just do this on the podcast.
Exactly.
I'll also say, Patrick, I looked up your IMDb as well. And when I saw Chef's Table, I didn't even I just stopped. I was like, whoa, that's all I'm going to talk about,
right.
which is ironic because it has nothing to do with writers, but maybe it does. I don't know. But yeah, excited to have you here. And no one should be curious why Patrick is here. We should be so honored to have an editor.
I agree.
Oh, I'm flattered. Thank you. I'm wondering why I'm here, actually. This works out.
We'll warm you up with an easy softball question. We like to start everybody off with, where did you come from? How the hell did you even hear about the entertainment industry and get into this thing? So start from the beginning. Tell us your story.
Yeah, so I went to San Francisco State for, I was a film major. They call it cinema there. It's their way of being different. And it was amazing. There was a lot of it wasn't a whole lot of I would say practical education, but it was a lot of especially early on, shooting on 8mm, drawing using crayons on it and then projecting it and seeing what happened, and talking about it and getting weird. And they have a great documentary program. So it was cool to sort of I felt like I had this sort of abstract film education. And then I studied abroad at a school called University of East Anglia, and that was more of film theory and film, so, and that's sort of where I learned how to talk about movies and which, I've learned later on and we'll probably touch on in our conversations. Everyone can talk about movies. That's what's great about movies, But yeah, so graduated college, moved down to Los Angeles, found a job at a post-production house called Rock, Paper, Scissors, which mostly does commercials, but they also, especially now, dabble in documentaries and short films and music videos and feature films, everything you can possibly imagine. So it was amazing to see a lot of different projects coming through the door and sort of experiencing the plethora of, let's say, options in the world and realizing that oh, those options could be for me too. I'm not just the door doesn't just have to, I don't have to just take the door that opens, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So when you went to film school, did you I'm going to be a director and that's the path, or I'm going to be a writer director, I'm going to be what was the plan, I guess?
I think when I first went, I sort of had it in my mind, director. I think everyone kind of does when they first go. And I pretty quickly realized that I was so interested in editing programs, and specifically Premiere and After Effects. I stole off the internet. Adobe sued me. And I was a poor college student. I had to do it. But I taught myself those programs while everyone else was shooting stuff, because I kept going to people and being like, hey, look, I know what I want to do. I want to edit. I've decided that, so let me edit your short film. But everyone wants to edit their own short films in college, which makes so much sense. So I ended up just shooting my own random things and experimenting, not even necessarily storytelling stuff. It was I would film my friends and I like running downstairs in slow motion, and then like throw it into After Effects and rotoscope us out so that like the stairs exploded. But just like silly things now, but at the time I was like, wow, this is amazing, like incredible. So yeah, that got me really passionate, and it sort of like fulfilled a lot of hobbies of mine, including like uh like I was in band in high school, so it fulfilled this sort of like musical rhythmic thing. I would, if I like, when you're listening to a song and you feel like it ends too early, I would like take that into an editing program and just like make it longer, and just because I was like, oh, I wonder if I can, and it's like all those things that I was experimenting with that I thought were totally useless ended up being like all of the skills I needed, not all of them, but a lot of the skills I needed, at least the very like base level to edit, which is just like all about experimenting, all about sort of like pushing the boundaries of what you can do.
That's very cool. I love hearing that.
After rock, paper, scissors, then what did you do after that?
It was amazing. I had a mentor named David Brody. I feel like I had everyone finds this. You have a bunch of mentors, and they're all, everyone like they're everyone who you like and like to listen to about work and stuff. And I felt like every editor at Rock Paper Scissors was a mentor, and we were like a group of assistants too who were really close together. We worked in like this cold dark room in the back, which is no longer a cold dark room, and we like still text about it that like the new assistants have it so much better, whatever.
Every generation's like that, man.
Yeah,
Exactly. I walked uphill both ways.
it's all true. You
Yeah,
get it
it's
when you
true.
get older.
But yeah, so like I just felt like I was learning a lot of things very quickly, because of the plethora of projects coming in, because of the human connections I made with people there. And I worked there for, I want to say 2.5 years, just constantly working and trying to do stuff on my like after hours, like working on music videos or short films and stuff. Then I got recommended for a music video for Little Dicky, and I took it. I was like, yeah, his music videos are great. It was for this song called Earth, and it actually is like a fully animated music video. And they decided after like starting on it that they wanted to do this live action intro directed by Tony Ascenda. I was very excited. I was like, yeah, let's do it. Sounds great. And I turned in my first cut. I swear this has a point. I turned in my first cut, and Dave, who is Little Dicky, loved it so much and said like, oh, I never really like a first cut of anything. Do you cut television? And I was sort of like taken aback. And mind you, I had like bribed the head of production of Rock Paper Scissors to let me use an edit bay, and like I was friends with the client services people, so they came in and like brought juices and made it look like I was sort of a hot shot. You know what I mean? Like I set the stage pretty well. So the edit being good was maybe a cherry on top, or it was the sundae and everything else was cherry on top, however you want to look at it. But I was like, oh, well, I very vaguely answered like, we've cut TV here. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Nice.
Because I definitely had not cut TV at that time. I had worked as an associate editor on a documentary, but that was it. And I was like, but do you have a TV show I should know about? And he was like, yeah, we shot and cut a pilot, and now it's greenlit for a season. And I was like, oh, well, if you bring your TV show here, like I have to cut it. And he responded with, well, I want you to cut my TV show. That's why I'm asking.
Wow.
And I was just like, oh, then my brain exploded, and I was just so stoked. So that was the big door that swung open. And from there, it was just like making sure I had enough hours to join the union, which was surprisingly not difficult based on all the projects I had been doing for the past couple of years. And yeah. And then next thing you know, I'm in TV.
It sounds like you like have an inherent knack for storytelling, right? Like along the ways, right? No, because
he lied. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
no, but that's not easy. You can't just cut a TV show, right? I mean, you have to be able to. And then it sounds like with what you were doing beforehand, I mean, God, I know I'm getting ahead, Tasha, but was like storytelling a big aspect in terms of like the editing process where you were talking with people even when you were doing commercials and before that, where you're like, hey, this is what the story we're trying to tell, and now you go with God and edit.
Yeah, I think I still sort of function in that way. I think most of like how I edit is sort of having a short conversation and then watching what they shot and figuring out like what I think is the best version of that, regardless. Like, of course, I'm reading the script. I'm getting sort of my idea of what it is based on that, and then I'm watching the dailies and sort of analyzing how that fits into sort of the box that I created in my mind when I read the script. And then I'm adding in the conversation I have with, the director or showrunner or writers, whoever, to also fuel sort of the intention of whatever I'm cutting. And I find that if I let myself sort of break down the box and just say like, oh, just make this whatever it needs to be, whatever's interesting, whatever grabs my attention, I usually find it opens a lot of doors and lets me sort of just dole it out. And it doesn't, like you're saying, like it's an inherent thing. I think we all have it. We all know if something's interesting or not. We know if like we're listening to a story and it grabs us. And it's hard to sort of look at your own work and do that. But I think it's really the most and maybe only necessary trait of storytelling is to be like, how do I make it interesting? You know what I mean? How do I just like pull everybody in and tell something meaningful and honest?
I'm going to dive into that
Go.
later, because we got to start linearly here. I want to start early in your career before we get into all that juicy
No,
storytelling
break down the
stuff.
box. No,
I know.
I'm just kidding.
Patrick, you just witnessed what happens with Tasha and I. I just go. I'm like
I'm
off
a writer.
course.
I like
I'm all
it.
about structure. We need our first
I'm
act.
just like, let's just throw things out there.
I'm very curious about your early career as a new editor, as you're starting Dave and you have no TV experience, which I'm sure is very scary and daunting for you, especially because you lied your way into the job.
Yeah.
But as you're starting to work with writers and showrunners, this question is really for the writers out there who might be working with first time editors, right? Like, how is that relationship different than when you were, more experienced? What kind of feedback or kind of context can you give to writers who might be working with first time editors? I'll let you take it.
My experience on Dave, like season 1, it was a total nightmare for me because everyone was lovely. That is not an issue in any way, but I was just so much like, what am I doing here? Sort of constantly inwardly wondering. And I was paired with 2 other editors, Ivan Victor and Matthew Barbato, who are incredible editors. Like Matthew Barbato is probably best known for Veep. Ivan Victor has done a million and one things, including like was one of the original Jackass editors. Like he's amazing and has a huge body of work. And so I was immediately intimidated. And they couldn't have been nicer. They were so welcoming. They were very much like, look at our edit, look at our sequences, like just get in there and learn whatever you can. And in hindsight, I didn't know it at the time, but in hindsight, realized like how generous they truly were about the situation, and knowing that I was sort of someone who came from nowhere, and me being open about that. I wasn't really like lying that much, like Dave liked working with me, and that's why I was there. And so it was okay for me to sort of accept that. And Dave too, Dave was a first time showrunner on that first season. So for him, it was a very new experience. And so it was, I always sort of thought of it like he wanted someone to kind of go on the journey with him. I don't know if he would agree with that, but that's how I always sort of viewed it. And it helped me sort of be like, oh, well, we're learning our own process together. And that in and of itself became sort of my, let's say, manifesto of like how I like to work is we come in with a clean slate and with the knowledge of how to do things mostly right, if we can, and uh, build the process that works for us, no matter who I'm working with. And as far as like writers, yeah, I think the kindness that I was shown was sort of a lot of patience, I would say, from writers, and a lot of conversation that wasn't jargon heavy. I think they realized pretty early on that my skill set or my knowledge base was not the same, and so our conversations pretty quickly became about emotional motivation or character motivation, and which are things that I think anyone on a production or a post team or filmmaking team in general are should and should be able to talk about. It's very accessible topics that are actually most of the driving force of storytelling in my mind. And so then I was just a sponge the whole time and just soaked up all of those conversations and sort of developed who I became as an editor, as well as learning like how to work well with people, because they were working with me, who was maybe a little on the naive, newer side to the business. So they were being kind to me and patient, and that meant the world.
As someone who's a new editor than working with a first-time showrunner, the thing we talk a lot about with writers and being a showrunner is you have to have a vision. You have to come into the editing bay and know instinctively if something feels wrong, and be able to talk stories. So, like, since you were also a new editor, how are those conversations going back and forth with Dave? Would he come into the room with a very clear vision and point you in the right direction, or did you find a vision together? Were you able to say, hey, here's a crazy V1 idea, Dave. What do you think? Or insert thing here.
I think that was something that I sort of developed maybe later. At first, I felt like I was sort of not necessarily like piecing the puzzle together. I was definitely contributing ideas and stuff, but it was a lot of like I was leaning on Dave and the EPs a little bit more. Whereas now I feel like I find that in my job, it's a privilege to sort of be able to pitch ideas like that. And not that there's any like blockage. No one's like telling me not to give ideas like that, but that I find it to be the most fun part of my job is sort of being like, all right, I feel like this was the idea, but here's my take on it. Let's talk about it. And that blend of ideas is actually what makes something even more interesting and layered. And as long as I find the way the conversations usually go when I do something like that are like, well, I just want to maintain a writer or an EP or a showrunner, who are usually all one and the same, will be like, well, I just want to maintain this feeling, or I just want to make sure that this motivation is still present, but I like your idea, but XYZ, then it's just a matter of tweaking and retweaking to make sure that like the flow of those motivations makes sense, and that we're catching all of those things without breaking the edit. And so, yeah, I think if I were to give advice to a writer who's either working with an editor for the first time, or an experienced writer who's working with a new editor, that sort of thing, I would say try to keep it about emotion and character, because it really empowers the editor to be able to do what they do. Because I find sometimes when I get very direct notes, like notes that are like, oh, well, we should cut to so and so here. I get it. Like there are times where that totally is applicable and makes sense, and also like is usually paired with the reason why it should. Um, but there's sometimes my favorite notes are ones where it's like, oh, like I sort of said earlier, I want to make sure that this character, that we really notice that they're feeling this in this scene. Let's find where the best place for that is. And then it really empowers me to be like, okay, let me really figure that out, and not just be like, okay, I'm going to plop in reaction shot here, because the if you break the flow of the scene by just cutting to someone to achieve one thing, you're sort of missing what's great about things being combined together, which is what editing's all about. It's taking all the layers of all the professions and putting them together to make something, to make a story have a myriad of voices instead of just one. And so I would say as a writer, like, be open to that, be open to letting all the voices come in and blend together and seeing what that produces before like sort of honing in on like, well, it needs to be XYZ or something.
Yeah. What I love when I talk to you, Patrick, it's so fun because it always feels like your job is exactly like our job. And I think it's important for writers to remember when they get into editing bays that you sort of now take on the position of the producer giving notes to the creative. And we hate getting notes that are like, cut to this person because it doesn't make any sense. And you're like, but why? Why are you feeling that way? And actually the answer is not to cut to that person. It's to not cut to the person. Like it's to stay off of that person. It's a totally different thing. So it's important. And it's great. I love hearing that. I want to talk, before we get into like the day in the life, I want to talk about like how you get you find jobs, because as writers, we're going to have to hire editors eventually. So like, what do you look for when you read a script, and what are those initial conversations with a writer that you might have that convinces you to come on to a project?
When I get a script, I'm reading it and making sure it grabs my attention, making sure that what I know is what will make my job easier is if the script has momentum. Sometimes I'll get scripts and it's like dialogue scene to dialogue scene to dialogue scene, and that's not cinema to me, or at least it's not really that fun to cut, because dialogue scenes can be really fun to cut, but when you have to figure out how to like transition between them, or figure out like if it's abrasive to just cut between them, like that's not always like conducive to me, as in terms of like there should be intention. I'm looking for intention is what I'm getting at. And that intention should be like, let's tell a cinematic story, and show don't tell. Like when I'm reading a script, I'm looking for all those things, and looking for how like characters are connecting with their environment, and not just like, I shouldn't be deducing things about them just from what they're saying. Like we should be seeing those things, and I want to see those things mentally in my head. So it's almost like the more I can see the film or TV show in my head already while I'm reading it, the more entertained I am, and therefore um am more attracted to working on a project like that.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. But do you have meetings with the showrunner typically before you sign on?
Yeah, of course. I usually get the script first. Basically, what'll happen is I have an agent, and my agent will be like, "Here's this project's interested. Here's the log line," and that log line is actually like really important. It lets me sort of be like, "Oh, that's not, that's a project about, I don't know, a high school love story, and that's not necessarily where I want to go next, unless it's like there's a crazy twist in this log line or something, and I'm not judging all projects based on this log line. And I'm going to call my agent, and we're going to have long conversations about everything she's pitching me for, and discuss what, who's working on it, what's going on with it, who's, what network or studio is it with, and discuss like what could be fun to do next. But that log line is certainly like the first, let's call it the door handle of the door, right? And then get the script, read the script. If I love the script, then there's a meeting. We have the meeting, and during the meeting, it's always talking about the script. It's always talking about like, well, here's what I love about the script. I tend to try. This is something I had to learn for sure. I try to be completely honest. If I don't like something, I obviously don't. I'm not like, oh, I didn't like this. I'm just sort of like, here's how I would do it. Like here's how I would, like, let's say if something is punchline heavy or something, like in that meeting, I would sort of find a tactful way of expressing that I would maybe want to execute those things a little more grounded, and that sort of lets them decide if that's sort of the vision that they also had for it. Because I feel like you can read any script, and you can read it as like any version of something. You can read it as like a sitcom, or you can read it as like a super creative indie film, and there's none of them are wrong, but like those tonal executions are so important. And so I try to sort of embed like my idea for that tone in the conversation, so that they can decide if I'm a good fit or not based on what they want to do tonally.
Yeah.
Have you ever given a note where you didn't agree with the tone, and the showrunner was like, you know what? You're right. And they like shifted the way an episode was, or the way a show was even? I mean, that's pretty heavy. But have you ever gone down that road where a rewrite happened because of you?
Oh yeah. There's like,
Oh, yeah.
not,
Every
I wouldn't,
every time.
Yeah. What are you
I
talking
wouldn't
about?
say like the tonal shift necessarily happened entirely because of me. Like everything that happens is because of conversations. It's because of multiple people deciding things. If it happened just because of me, then there's something wrong.
Yeah.
But like, yeah, I think, and if we're talking about like in those meetings, those initial meetings, like I don't know if I change the style tonally per se, but I think like as showrunners and EPs are hiring people, that's happening no matter what. Like they're sort of like they're hiring the DP and discussing with them, and when the DP says their vision, I would hope that it sort of influences, what it's going to be, and so yeah, I tend to talk a lot about like what I would want the language of it to be, which is ultimately what I think sort of editing is the language of the show. And I like to think that that sort of influences their vision. But yeah, like during the process when we're actually cutting it, there's been plenty of times where we have experimented tonally and pushed something in a direction it wasn't necessarily in before, like far down a different tone, truly, like from comedy to pure drama sort of thing, and it's required reshoots. It's required sometimes it's just like, oh, it works, this is great, we did it, like there's so much you can do in editing that's really miraculous. And I mean, a lot, it's why they being probably mostly editors, call it like, what do they call it? The last rewrite,
Hmm.
is
Yeah,
in
for
the
sure.
edit booth,
What would you say are some red flags maybe for you when you are having those initial meetings with a showrunner?
Oh, I mean, I think it's tough because everyone wants to make their project, so like if a red flag would be if I'm describing the tone that I want, and then they describe one that's the polar opposite, then I'm just like, oh, I need to understand that I'm probably not a good fit, even if I want that job, like that job is gonna not go that well because it'll be a bumpy road probably the whole time because we don't agree tonally, sort of thing. Another thing is if there are like no questions asked about editing.
Yeah, that's always bad.
Yeah, I'm just sort of like, editing can be sort of like a vague profession. I think there's a lot of different ways to be an editor. You can be the puzzle piecer, or you can be like straight up like directing the show in a way, like a secondary director almost. But I find if you have no interest in it, it does concern me. It does sort of make me like, oh, okay, I'm going to be working by myself.
Right.
And that you don't want that. That's not why anyone does this, in my opinion. Like the point is collaboration.
I'm, like, thinking back to when I was hiring editors and, like, how I must have come off in those meetings because I feel like I ask about, like, what they thought about the script and, like, if they have any ideas. They were all nervous, so, like, I think they were nervous to present ideas, and so it's just like, "Okay." It's like, you can't really ask, like, "How would you edit this?" Like, so from our perspective, it's like it's hard to sort of, unless you're someone like yourself who I think is more experienced, more confident, more able to say like, this is how I see your show, this is sort of my vision, there's scenes like this where I feel like I'd ground, like that is all so helpful to me as a showrunner. But like for someone who is, and the editors that we hired weren't first timers, I think they were just, I don't know, they really wanted the job and they were nervous. So they sort of weren't having that conversation. And as a showrunner, it's like, well, what am I going to ask you then if you're not offering me things and this is not a conversation? You know, like what?
Yeah, and that's fair. I think it's not every, like, I've had good meetings where we don't talk about editing, is the truth. It's more just like if everything else adds up to that. Like to me, the first interview I had was Sterling Harjo, who created Reservation Dogs and now The Lowdown. You know, he's an incredible experienced filmmaker, and didn't really ask me that many questions about editing, but he was so funny. We got on the interview and he just said, "What do you think of the show? Tell me about the show." And that's everything he needed to know.
Yeah.
He wanted to know that I liked the show, that I like actually was understanding like the meaning and what's important about the show. And there's so much in Reservation Dogs that it was easy for me to just, and I loved it already. I was just like gushing, and telling him like what characters interested me the most. And so like, after that conversation, he was like, well, you seem like a nice guy. Fuck it. Let's
Yeah.
give it a go,
Fuck
and
it.
like, that's what I find. And I think most editors would say this, like, when people are interviewing editors, the biggest thing they're looking for is, do I want to spend a lot of time with this person?
Yep. That was my big like number one, honestly, in interviewing.
Yeah, because you're going to be in the trenches with them for a long time, and you want to make sure that they're not like a wet blanket, or like that they are. You want to make sure they're excited. You know, that to me is the most important thing of all. Is that like they're not a jaded person. They want to bring something to your project. You know, it's like all of those things are so important, and that's you know, vice versa. That's what editors are looking for in writers, is that they're excited and that they want to tell this story, and that they're looking for people passionate enough to tell that story.
Yeah. And another thing for me was that I know that I'm weak in music.
Hmm.
And so, like, asking them about music edits and are they comfortable with music edits? How do they feel about it was really good for me because I needed someone to kind of like fill my weakness.
Oh yeah,
Are you good at music edits, Patrick? How do you feel?
I'm so good at music edits. I mean, that's what I did in college. Like I said, I would just do that for fun. So yeah. Are you gonna hire me?
Maybe we'll see.
Great,
But
perfect.
You're on the short list.
it's crazy because, I mean, the correlation between editors and writers, everything you're saying is just like, I'm thinking of, oh yeah, this is how we talk when you were talking about log lines before, and when you're sitting in this room, you're like, this is how I see the show. I mean, when you're in those positions, are you giving tonal comps? Like, for instance, if you read a script, maybe the show hasn't been on yet, you read a script for the first time, and are you saying, I see this as like, Succession? It's like, and you're trying to like kind of give your vision on how you want the show to be from the edit. Is that kind of what you're saying, like when you're meeting with a writer or a showrunner?
Yeah, I feel like I pretty rarely do what I'll do is I'll be like, oh, it's like such and such meets such and such, you know. But it's pretty rare that I actually do that, because I find that there are a lot of filmmakers who are reference heavy people, in terms of like they're like, oh, I want it to be like Apocalypse Now, you know, and I'm just sort of like, yeah, but
But
you
it's
know,
not.
it's not. So like let's make our own iconic thing. You know, like what's that? You know, and I find that it's way easier to find that by not referencing something that exists, but talking about emotion and character, and getting more at it in that sense. But I'm not immune to it. I certainly will reference something if it's helpful, and lets them sort of clue in on, yeah, tonally what I'm hoping to either work on or achieve with this project, sort of thing.
That's a good answer. All right, I want to get into the day in the life of your job as it pertains to working with a showrunner. So, like, you're on a show now, it's in production, the train is on its track and it's not stopping. So, just tell us a little bit about, like, open the door, show us a little bit about what your day in the life is like now that you're getting dailies back, etc.
It's sort of like depends on what scenes I'm getting. So like let's say I'm getting a dialogue heavy scene. Sometimes what I'll do to start the day is I'll reread the scene from the script, the latest script, which there's always a new one, it feels like, especially as they're starting out. And what's great about the beginning of production, it's like the best time for an editor. They're having the best time of their life because work has not stacked up, you know, like they're not behind on anything, and no one's bothering them about anything at all because everyone's busy with production. So editors just get to like experiment and be weird, and like pull the footage down and just watch it for the day, and then be like, okay, I'm gonna do a rough assembly and then I'm done, like blah blah, you know. So at the very beginning it's an extremely lovely thing, and it's also like part of it is sort of I'm doing a lot of like looking for music. I'm doing a lot like temp score and stuff. I'm doing a lot of like watching other movies and shows that are maybe tonal comps, like you said, to that were recommended probably from the showrunner, to sort of decide how we're going to go about creating this show. But yeah, that's sort of like I'll watch dailies and sort of dissect like what I read from the script versus how the dailies fit into that box, or break the mold and are something new. And I cut that version of the scene. And I spend my days doing that until there's an editor's cut, which is usually due like 2 to 3 days after they're done filming said episode.
Are you sending any scenes in the meantime to the showrunner, or don't do that because that could get crazy?
It totally depends on the director. I don't like doing that. I am capable of doing that, but like I've been lucky that I work with directors who are sort of like, I want to see the whole thing, your take on the whole thing. There are times when like Sterling's one of those people, and there's times where Sterling will call up and be like, "Hey, send me an assembly of this scene. I'm not sure if we got enough coverage, or I'm not sure if like we shot that interestingly enough for what the scene needs to be." And so then that will become a conversation. But more often than not, if he's feeling really confident, then he just lets me go with it and take the episode as a whole as a first pass. And then when I'm sending it to him, he's watching it for the first time, kind of thing.
Do you ever get a scene back that makes me wonder? Do you ever get a scene back and like, we don't have enough coverage on this, I should let Sterling know?
Oh yeah, yeah, and it's pretty rare with those guys. They're a well-oiled machine, but it happens where it's just sort of like, hey, I can see that maybe there's a problem here, or like there's a continuity issue because they're like in the lowdown, like Lee's van is there, but then it's not there when he goes inside, and sometimes it's like, oh well, color's gonna blow out those windows anyway, like we don't really care or whatever, and other times it's like, oh well, we can solve that by doing this very simple thing. And sometimes I try to give that solution. I try to, with everything, I try to come at it with a solution, even if it's not like, I don't think it's the greatest idea. I try to come at it with a solution so that I'm not just like the editor that's saying, raising my hand because there's a problem,
Yeah. That's great.
An editor I worked with named Ivan Victor said one of my favorite things I've ever heard, which is, you know how there's like a group of crows is a murder, a group of fish is a school. He would say that a group of editors is a complaint. And so I never want to fit that trope. I'm always trying to, like if I'm complaining about something or saying that like something maybe needs help, then offering a solution as well.
I feel like you're speaking to our souls right now. These are things we speak about all the time on the podcast in terms of like not being jaded, not complaining, like figuring things out.
Oh, I'm so happy to hear that.
I know, we're exactly the same.
Yeah.
Okay, so you get you get your dailies back. You're living your blissful life here. No one's bothering you because they're in production, and then you wrap on that episode, and you have 2 to 3 days. You said to assemble a V1. And is anyone in the room with you, or that's Patrick's time? He gets to do his V1 and his vision of what V1 is.
That's Patrick's time. Yeah, and it's a great time. No, it's good. It's really, editor's cuts are really fun. They are terrifying. Ask any editor, the first time you send that editor's cut off, you're like, fuck, I don't know if I did it. Even if you did it, even if you're like, man, I rocked that episode, you're still sending it off and being like, I do not know how much work is ahead of me. It's this very daunting thing to send off, which I'm sure you guys are well experienced with, sending off a V1 of a script.
Yeah.
And yeah, but then it gets exciting because then the director comes back and even if they're unhappy with it, if they're a good director, they know where to go with it, and they know like how to guide you or empower you to sort of exemplify maybe the work that's already there or is lacking.
Are you in any of the concept meetings that come before, like that come during prep with the director and the DP and all of that as they're establishing tone and pacing of scenes? Are you in those meetings as well?
I am, yeah. I sort of had to earn my place to get there. On the lowdown, I'm a co-producer, and that's part of the reason is I'll sort of give feedback on scripts, and I'll play a big role in post in whether there's reshoots or anything of that sort of making sure that things are tonally cohesive, and really it's like being secondhand to Sterling so that everything is moving correctly, and making sure that post process is all fluid and stuff so that he can focus on the creative aspects, sort of thing. But yeah, there's plenty of concept meetings and talking through what's what. But yeah, I feel like I had to sort of earn my spot. There's always like a concept meeting right before they start shooting or something, but I find those are like rarely about concept. They're sure, at least in live action or scripted, is like it's mostly about like how are we going to do this? It's like almost a production meeting, but not quite a production meeting, you know. And I'll chime in here and there if like you know, uh, I'm curious what kind of music Sterling wants in the background of said scene or something like that. And if he has an idea, then he can tell me right then and there. But yeah, I think those are the meetings that like most editors are invited to. But I feel like I kind of had to earn my spot in conversations earlier than that, if that makes sense.
Yeah, interesting. So you send off your editor's cut, and is it the director and showrunner who comes in into the editing bay, producer? Like, what does it now look like after they review it and come back to you?
It's always director's cut first. And so the director, they won't even share it with anybody else. Sometimes the director, if they're like really buddy with the showrunner, or if the director is the showrunner, will, you know, the showrunner will see it. But yeah, if the director is a different person, then we are like, it's me and the director isolated, working together on their director's cut until it's ready to go. The amount of time for said director's cut varies from project to project. There's a DGA minimum, but it also boils down to like how much the showrunner is willing to be flexible and let the director like keep working on something. Yeah, it basically goes working with director's cuts, and then producer's cuts. And the producer's cuts usually just means like you're working with the showrunner or whoever the showrunner wants to join, which are usually the other EPs or whatever writers they want to join as well, which are usually writers that they want to. I've noticed this. They're usually writers that they want to teach, that they want to be like, hey, experience editing. You maybe haven't done it before. And that's always the best, actually. I'm sort of going on tangent here, but you said that was okay, so I'm gonna go
Mhm.
for it. It's always the best when EPs, because it's also like I found EPs usually, or showrunners will usually do this when they're sort of feeling tired or like blind to something, which happens. We've been working on it for weeks, you know, like I get blind to stuff sometimes, and they'll bring in a writer who maybe doesn't have the most editing session experience, and it really reinvigorates the process. It becomes like, oh, it's not just fresh eyes, but it's like a fresh rework of our process of like understanding one another. It like totally changes the vibe of like how people work together. And I find it fascinating, and it really injects a lot of excitement in me and makes it like, it's sort of like bringing your friend to class that they don't take, and you're just sort of like, oh well, here, let's show you this, like this is what we're excited about, and like this is what's cool, you know. And we're like, and then it's like, well, and here's what we're insecure about, and they'll be like, why? It's great. And we go, oh wow, cool, okay, you know. So
Yeah.
it's like such a cool thing. And I find if I can make the process not intimidating in terms of like I talked about earlier, like using too much jargon or too much discussion about like editing, if we're talking about emotion and character, like those it's going to be so fruitful with whoever we're working with, whether they know editing or not, you know. It's going to, and I'm going to get the notes that I want, which are notes of like, oh, I want this character to feel more like this in this scene, or notice that someone else feels more like this in this scene, like uh and it's a beautiful process.
I love hearing that. I love hearing that that helps and doesn't sort of like, I don't know, make everyone go, ugh, like a new writer or like a young writer who's not experienced. We don't want that voice in the room. It's very cool to hear because yeah, as showrunners, many of us take it upon ourselves to try to just teach other showrunners because so many writers, especially now with smaller shows like 8 episode runs at a Netflix, you don't get to bring a writer with you into post or even to production really. So it is such a gift to be able to show a writer what you do because and why this episode is so important because so many writers don't get a chance to work with editors until they do and then they fuck it up because they've never done it before, right? So no pressure, Patrick, but this is going to be a lot of people's first intro to what it's like in your world.
Yeah. Oh, well, cool. I mean, my hope, I mean, my goal is always to not be an asshole. You know what I mean? Like there are so many assholes in this world, and honestly, especially in Hollywood, and it just feels like it's not necessary. Like if I can approach something the same way that those editors on Dave, or the EPs and writers on Dave, the patience they showed me to let me thrive and empowered me to sort of be excited about it. If I can show that to anybody who enters my edit bay, like I'm gonna do it, And so yeah, I feel like every editor should act like that, and every writer should go in empowered, thinking, well, we're here to talk about story. This is storytelling, and that's the basis of everything we're going to talk about. And that's it,
Yeah, I love that. That's a really good segue to the next bit about talking about, from your perspective as an editor, what makes for a good writer or a good storyteller when it comes time to be in that editing bay with you.
I think the biggest thing to me is openness. It's being flexible. Like, the phrase, the script is the Bible or whatever. Like, I hate it. I'm not gonna lie to you. I think most people kind of do. I think, like, yes, the script is the Bible. The script, of course, it's the story, but also, like, we're gonna add to it. We're gonna layer onto it. And sort of like I said earlier, I think a writer or a showrunner or an EP who is willing to break down the walls a bit, to it's when they're able to see that, like, they don't recognize it, but that doesn't make it bad, because there's a lot of people, a lot of filmmakers, a lot of storytellers who are trying to, like I said earlier, reference something and try to make their version of said something. But I just don't think that that's actually, like, the best goal. I think the best goal is to make the thing you're making unique and make it, like, be weird, go out there, like, break the rules and respect the ones that make sense to you, so that you can make your own thing. It's like the rebellious kid who, like, accepts the good traits of their parents, which are the people who came before them, and takes those and moves forward to make their own thing and be their own parent. It's that kind of thing you want to create, and not just replicate. So I think any showrunner who's willing to do that, instead of be like, oh, well, this is wrong because of XYZ, it's so much more helpful and so much more fruitful when it comes to storytelling. There are times where, like, I'll be like, oh, well, we have this unique version of the scene, and they're like, well, no, there is this unique thing in this script. Like, let's talk about that. And that is in itself, it's like you have to be very aware and of when to insert sort of, like, not authority, but just, like, that conversation of trying to discern if you know better or not. And it's just great when someone is comfortable in that sense. But that's why they're a showrunner. It took them however long to get that skill set to have that conversation, if that makes sense.
Yeah. As you're talking, an example of this just came up when I was in an edit this week, where the editor showed a version of a scene that took out a joke, essentially. And, I could have been the kind of writer that's like, I wrote it for a reason, put it back. But I was not, because I was like, well, why did you feel like you wanted to take it out? What were you feeling in the scene that made that feel like the answer? And he said it felt like a tense scene, a very somber scene, and that the joke was releasing tension when we didn't want to do that. And I was like, okay, well, the joke is there to relieve tension. So when you look at it again and you're really putting together your locked episode, just think about that. Like, that was the intention of the moment. If you still feel like it doesn't belong, take it out. Like, and that to me, like, I love working with editors that you can trust like that, where they understand what the scene is about and will produce the best version. So I'm excited what he does with it in the lock. That changes his mind. But, like, I love that you love working with writers like that as well, because that's also, like, my favorite part of post.
Oh yeah, totally. And like, I find when I get a note like that, of like, oh, we'll take a look at it again. That really, one, it's such a sign of respect that you're giving me the responsibility of that. And also, I will look at it again. I'm gonna really look at it now and really discern. And it might just be a performance thing. It might just be like, the performance was too jokey to have it there, so I cut it out. But now that I think about it, there was a performance that was a little more subtle. You know what I mean? That's where,
Yeah,
like, my
that's
brain
great.
goes.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's just, like, to me, fruitful collaboration. So that's cool.
I love it. I love it. So fun. Okay. How do you like to work with writers when you're in post? Do you like someone over your shoulder? Do you like them in the room with you going scene by scene? Or do you prefer, I'm going to send it to you, you give me notes, and then I'll do another pass and then we'll watch it together? How do you like to work with a writer?
It varies. I tend to like to work the way they like to work. My personal preference is that like I send them the cut, they give me notes, I take a stab at it. If I don't get the next stab correct, we should be in a room together. We should.
Mm-hmm.
That means we should be talking it out. I always like want to make their job easier. Like that's just seems like why I'm getting paid to do this. Otherwise I'm just getting paid for my hobby. But like I just want to make sure that I'm delivering something that they're happy with and I'm happy with. And part of that is me feeling that way is when I can do it instead of someone telling me what to do, if that makes sense. Because button pushing is not fun editing. And I don't think it's fun for anyone doing it. But sometimes, like if someone feels very passionate about it, like I understand and I will go down that road. It's not like problematic. It's not the most fun, for anybody. And that's just the truth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. Josh, I have only one more question. So if you have something to pepper Patrick with, now's the time.
I'm going to pepper you with something.
Ooh.
I was going to throw a curveball about AI and just kind of get your general thoughts. But everything that you have said is the reason, in my opinion, that there's like this human connection and there's this certain nuance and like everything that you're talking about is just, it's just so beautiful. And in terms of kind of like the connection between stories, editors, storytelling, writers, editors, directors, the whole thing, like this is why this machine works.
Yeah.
So I'm not even going to throw any AI stuff at you because I feel like you've squashed all the things and just
I want to know. Now you have me curious.
No.
You can. Yeah, I'm not opposed. Well, I mean, like I'm opposed to AI, but
Yeah.
here's the thing. If do you want me to go down this road?
I do.
Okay. I feel like a lot of editors are sort of in this boat too, that like we're between a rock and a hard place when it comes to AI, because my job in so many ways is to try to make the most polished version of a rough thing. And then it gets passed off to, like the picture gets passed off to online editors who are pulling the real imagery and coloring it and making it beautiful. And VFX artists who are coming in and replacing the temp things that I did with actual things that actually are gorgeous and look real. Or sound designers coming in and replacing my temp sound design, yada, yada, yada. So like for me, AI can be this incredible tool that makes temp things for humans to do the human way, and that is the crux of it for me, of just like, cool, it's this tool that can help do XYZ, but it can't ultimately do the thing, and I think we need to look at it like that, because even when it looks like it's doing the thing, it's not doing the thing, because like you said, like the thing is collaboration. The thing is hearing human voices. The thing is, and I think it's a tool that is going to be really empowering for young filmmakers to be able to start to see their visions come to life, but ultimately the goal should be to create a vision instead of just like executing one that something else creates. You want to be a part of, craftsmanship is ultimately an important part of filmmaking and should stay that way.
Yeah. It's like having a voice or a vision.
Yes.
Tasha, take us home.
All right. Okay. For writers who may not have ever gone through the post process, I guess the final question is just, what should writers be thinking about, from your opinion, as they're finalizing their scripts, getting ready to take it out into the world? And this is the thing we're going to be making. How do I make your life easier? Or what are hurdles you've seen happen in post that could have been fixed if the writer had just thought about this in the script, whether they're common things you see every day or like an exceptional story that you might remember?
I think it's always like do a show don't tell pass. Do a like momentum check. Sort of like try to feel the rhythm. Try to make sure that you are seeing the script. You're not just reading it. And I think when I'm not a writer myself, but like when I get scripts that I can really feel, I can feel the momentum, I can feel the tactileness of it and see it in my mind. Um, I always feel like I can believe in it more, if that makes sense. And that helps everyone along the way. It helps me understand that everyone else is going to believe in it too, and that it'll be more of a fruitful story that way to feel real in this world that we're in. So yeah, I would say my advice is to yeah, think about the editing, think about the cinematography, think about everything, after you get all your ideas down, after you get sort of this shape of the story you want to tell, just think about how is it cinematic and how can you make it cinematic sort of thing.
I know, I feel like I literally after this want to go do a show not tell pass on my spec right now.
It makes me so happy when I read a lot of action in script now, and I don't mean like bam bam action. I mean like it's just like objects. I love when I a script has like an object in it. That sounds so dumb, but it's true. Like
No, we literally have this conversation all the time. When you have a character who is feeling a certain way, what can they use within the room, within the space that shows that they're feeling that thing instead of just saying it? We talk about that all the time. It's great
totally.
to know that that's helpful to you.
Oh, absolutely. In Mighty Nine, when I'm terrible with names and characters, even on the
Uh-huh.
shows that I work on, I'm
Uh-huh.
really bad at
Uh-huh.
remembering the names. But there is
It's helpful that they're all a different color, the green one or the purple
yeah.
one.
Well, she was like the shorter green witch lady,
Okay.
who like had maggots that she would crush to
Uh-huh. Oh,
like
yeah,
do
yeah. Uh-huh.
spells and stuff. And I was like, that is the coolest like way to cast magic is that you have to like do this physical thing with it first, and that was so satisfying to me and like very much what we're talking about of like object
Yeah.
based storytelling sort of thing.
Yeah. Why does that help you? Can I ask?
Yeah, of course, because it's we're gonna cut to it. We're gonna hopefully they're gonna shoot it, like i- it's a lot of there's sort of a mindset that like inserts are bad with live action scripted, that like if you need to show an insert, you're clarifying something too much. I kind of disagree. I think it's like it's sometimes so nice to be rhythmic and connect the audience to something specific. The lowdown is so evidence heavy. Like he has this big board with strings on it, basically, and newspapers everywhere. And like that became something we actually ended up reshooting, was to get more of, because we just felt like having this sort of tactile evidence for a journalist was crucial. Um, to feel like he was progressing, when his character is so manic that from scene to scene it doesn't totally feel like he's actually getting somewhere with his investigation. It kind of feels like he's bumbling and stumbling along and ruining his life in the process. And that tactile evidence like helps so much to tell that story. So for me, it's yeah, it's a tool. It's just it's any objects are always going to be a tool of helping tell that story. And if we can cut to them to break up rhythms, or even have a whole scene of newspaper clippings and stuff, then it's useful.
You've just reminded me that, our time is up as it were, but I feel like I would love to have you back on where it's just a series of stories that you have where the script has changed, the show has changed because once you get in the editing room, you realize it's not working. And what is the solution? Because a big part of our job as showrunners, writers, writer directors is when we get into like, we need to come up with solutions because what we shoot isn't always going to work once you get it. And it's just because things change. And that's like the beauty of our business. And the scary thing is like, it's always changing in every iteration. So once we get into the room with someone like you, Patrick, it's like, well, fuck, it's not coming out who I wanted it to be. It's all right. I didn't get the right stuff. Like, what is the solution? Let's work together. And you have some good stories and I only know a few of them. So I'd love to do an episode where you just come in and talk about like some really crazy solutions to problems.
Oh, that'd be fun. I'd love that.
All right, cool. Well, I'm going to take us out with the quote of the day. Nobody hits it out of the park every time, and a masterpiece might have 3 or 4 test runs behind it in which the artist was working some things out. George Saunders. Patrick, thank you so much for coming on. I was just riveted. I hope everyone else was. I'm sure they were. It was a really good time. Thank you for sharing it with us.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. This was a blast.
All right, please remember to rate and subscribe. Follow us at Act2Writers for more awesome writing stuff. You can follow me, Tasha, at Story Thursday on Instagram or on Twitter at Tasha 3.0. And as always, the Act 2 podcast is a production of Act 2, a network and support group for the everyday working screenwriter. This episode was edited by Paul Lundquist.